Welcome to another episode of Investing in Intellectual Property with Dave. Today, we have a very special guest with us. This gentleman has created a revolutionary product and literally removes the lid from the can. He's been featured on the hit show Shark Tank, where he was able to secure a deal with one of the sharks, and he's now here to discuss his journey with us. Please help me welcome Armand Ferranti. How's it going, Armand?
Pretty good, David. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I know we were talking offline a little bit about, I guess, the origin of the podcast and kind of really trying to not only, to the best of my ability, help with some of the kind of marketing and advertising of kind of your product, but also at the same time, just kind of giving it another, like a story for the audience to kind of follow as it relates to somebody kind of having an ideal in their head and kind of bringing it to an actual product that they're now selling. I would imagine, like a lot of other guests, this stuff can be life-changing, not necessarily just from the money standpoint of it, but it seems like it gives you like a new meaning compared to just maybe doing a 9-to-5 thing day in and day out for 30 years. So I'm definitely excited to hear your story as I was preparing for it. It's a pretty fascinating story. But I guess I'd like to start at maybe at the beginning as it relates to, can you describe the product for the audience?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks again for having me on the show. Excited to be here and share our story. So Draft Top makes a line of barware products that are designed to enhance the customer experience drinking out of the beverage can. There's a lot of great stuff comes in cans. Almost everything does, but very few people actually enjoy drinking out of them. So the products, we got a consumer product, which is a handheld version, which is what we started with. We've now progressed to a commercial product for bars, restaurants, and stadiums. And it is essentially designed to open the can safely. It does so on the inside rim of the can here, which leaves that pressed on factory rim that makes it not only safe to drink from, but the equivalent to a glass. So, and that little bit of science behind it is your ability to smell what's in the can affects how you taste it. It also flows out like a glass as opposed to the sippy cup effect that you get when you normally drink from a beverage can. And then obviously, if you're a Corona drinker, you can throw a lime in. If you're you like mixed drinks, you can put Jack into a Coke and make a cocktail right in the can. So the list of use cases is pretty broad.
Well, yeah, for sure. And as I was doing some homework on this thing, it was interesting in terms of the inspiration. So from my understanding, it seems like you were in the aerospace industry. And I was reading something where did they like actually teach you how to properly remove, I guess, the lid from with your teeth, or is that something that just kind of joking around, you kind of stumbled?
It was just a party trick that one of the guys at flight school had taught me, and that was kind of, I would say, like the seed that was planted.
Yeah.
The idea. I didn't really think much of it at the time, but it was just, I've seen a lot of people do too. You just use your canine tooth. It's a bit barbaric, but
crazy.
It was a cheap American beer during college, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is a lot better. And that kind of sat with me until about 2011. I was at a family dinner getting ready to open up a bottle of wine while drinking a beer. And I was like, well, if I could use the foil cutter like this to open up a can, it would make the experience drinking out of the can so much better. I wouldn't have to pour it into a glass. And that was kind of like the aha moment at that time.
Sure. No, I like that. And I guess out of curiosity for myself, more of a selfish question, was that painful to do that with your teeth? That seems like that would have been extremely painful.
No, and believe it or not, I don't think it's as dangerous as people think, because you're using your canine tooth, which is relatively dull, and you as you puncture the side of the can, it kind of comes in this way.
Yep.
So you're not really, subjected to the sharp edge per se, but I'm fairly certain no dentist would recommend that, nor would any, nor does it make sense to do if there's a tool that you can buy, that does it.
For sure. So then I guess another thing that you hit on, or you mentioned that I had wanted to hit on, is what was the hold up? Because it seemed like you said that maybe this was in 2000, and then 11 years later, before you had that aha moment, or was like, hey, let's do something about this. Why do you think, I guess, that gap in process is life hit, or like what was the gap in process as opposed to kind of going right into it from that standpoint?
Yeah. So I would say that aha moment is really in 2011 is where that trigger occurred, because the first seed at flight school was 2000. So there's an 11-year gap. But I will give a small backstory to say that I'd always been passionate about the idea of inventing. I'd always looked to the Thomas Edisons of the world, the Howard Hughes, the Nikola Teslas. I mean, that to me, I was fortunate enough to know early on in life that I'd love to be an inventor. And as you probably know from being in the patent world, really can't start a career as an inventor anywhere. Like there's no course curriculum for it.
Right.
And I went into the corporate world. So I worked in the aerospace business for a total of about 14 years. But, there was days and I work for great companies, but you're sitting in the cubicle and you're like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Making a lot of money, but I'm just like not really enjoying this. And all of my friends or my colleagues would be like, oh, I got an idea for something. We should do this or we should try that. And I kind of got to a point where I'm like, kind of sick of talking about it. I want to just do something. And
right.
So that was 2011. And then from there till about 2015, when we went to the first Kickstarter, was physically trying to figure this out, going to Home Depot, buying stuff, kind of coming up with prototypes. And then my co-founder's wife, were like, listen, you guys have spent a lot of money. It's been 3 or 4 years. You got to make a decision. You're going to do something. Kickstarter was new. I think not relatively new, but somewhat to me at the time. It was like, here's a perfect platform to prove the concept before you leave your job, before you go making life changes. And that helped kind of validate, is there a market for this, which is huge. Because one thing I've learned is commercializing innovation is paramount to success. If you just have a great idea, but you don't commercialize it, it won't survive. So what took up most of that time.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, they say most of if you want to go to a place where there's a lot of ideas there, just go to the graveyard. A lot of people have these ideas and they just never kind of bring them to light, unfortunately. And I think better than ever. I know someone, kind of speaking personally, from someone who has helped a ton of people who were maybe blue collar workers or whatnot, bring their ideal, or at least protect their ideal. And as a result of it, they were able to bring their ideal and their product to an actual product and sell it, and that be life changing. I know firsthand, and I've seen firsthand how things can change as far as just being an entrepreneur, protecting your ideal, bringing it to light, which is cool for me. But I think also another thing I wanted to mention is, and we'll get off into the Kickstarter here in a little bit, and I just think with platforms such as Kickstarter, such as Amazon, such as just even you being able to have your own website, it's a game changer for people as compared to say 20, 30 years ago, where to get an ideal or be an entrepreneur or have a product or whatnot, you had to go into the big box retail, whether it's Target or Walmart. But now it's like, no, if you have a product with the online platforms and e-commerce and you being able to build out your own website and market through social media and TikTok and Instagram, the chance has, the opportunity for success, in my opinion, has kind of climbed exponentially. Whether or not you have success is a different story, but I think the opportunity for success is a lot better now in 2024 compared to what it was 20 or 30 years ago, which predated the internet and social media and all that stuff. Would you, tend to agree with that?
Oh, completely. Yeah, because had my co-founder, who'd been involved with me kind of from the beginning, not mentioned Kickstarter, I would have been knocking on doors. And that to me was what you did. It's what the stories you heard about. Literally, hey, I got an idea. You want to
call
And at the same time, I think that the Kickstarters of the world, they've evolved since when we were there in 2015 till now. It is a bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that it's great to prove out a concept, to determine the market and the opportunity, to get the funds needed to pursue the idea, the invention. But it's and that it's public, and you can use that to kind of show other potential investors or other companies, hey, everybody likes this. They bought it. You should too. But you're also, because it's public now, and I've seen this since 2020, we'll get into this later, you are now letting the rest of the illegitimate manufacturing world know, oh, hey, there's a new idea. Let's go take that. Or let's create a variant of that idea that maybe doesn't infringe on their patent and compete. And, so but the world's changed. And I think that that's the important thing for people to decide. I think even before you get into like the concept of what you're going to do with this idea or invention is, do you want to, I've talked to so many people since I've left my corporate career to pursue this. Do you want to just be an inventor where you come up with an idea, you show it as a proof of concept, then you license it and let somebody else go take it to market? Or do you want to build a business and a brand around it, which is a different effort, but also could fuel future? For me, that's the game plan here, is like, how do I get in? I have more ideas. How do I invent more,
And that's the great thing about entrepreneurship is, hey, this first invention, maybe you make $1 million, maybe you don't. I would imagine that you're still, if it's done right and it's something that the market is wanting, you're going to make some money off of it. But now you know the process. You've been through the process, you've been through the ups and downs. So now if it took you 2 or 3 years to come to market with the product, maybe the next time around it only takes you a year, because as you mentioned, entrepreneurs, inventors, they always have ideas. They have, and now it's like, okay, I can kind of do this over and over again. And again, maybe I am biased as a patent attorney and kind of want people to, or at least I want, I guess, individuals to market or to protect their ideal, to come out with an ideal and protect it and whatnot and set it up. I mean, I just think that it's almost even more imperative, even if you're like staying at your corporate job, that's cool, but you almost need to do something on the side because the days of staying with that one company for 30 years, those days are over with. Whether you see a hiring and the layoffs or firing layoffs, whatever the case may be, it's way too cyclical to just put your livelihood in one company and not do anything to yourself. So do anything for yourself. So if you're work the 9 to 5, that's cool. But if you're going to do something on the side, I definitely recommend still doing something on the side with the product. You don't have to be full-time in it, at least initially, but still doing something kind of maybe to build up to that way. Or heck, you can, like you said, license it out. So now, okay, you are still maybe, if you want to do the 9 to 5 thing, but you're still having some passive income coming in on the side from licensing a product out and not necessarily have to, as you talked about, expend those efforts on a day-to-day basis to actually build a brand. So it's a lot of different ways to do it, but I just think it's almost more imperative now than ever to have different things going on. And everybody has ideas. Everybody goes through problems that they have on a day-to-day basis. And again, if you're having that problem, most likely somebody else is having that same problem. So being able to, okay, if you come up with a solution, hey, take a hard look at just going through the process with that solution and bringing it into an actual product to sell to the masses, as opposed to just kind of keeping it for yourself. At least that's the way I kind of look at it in today's time.
Yeah, I would completely agree too, because I think if you have an innate interest in pursuing something, there's a passion you're looking to fulfill, that side hustle is a great way to do it. And I did it for 2011 to 2020. It was a good 9 years of just side hustling to try to figure this out. And what better way to do it when you have a 9 to 5 to kind of be that base and that support. And also, it lets you know if after 3 or 4 years, you're struggling to really get it to market and you're losing steam, well, maybe you're not that passionate. And,
right.
and therefore, cool, you still got a base, you still have some foundational, position with a career to kind of stabilize you, but satisfying that passion to pursue something, I think is important if you have it, because otherwise you're going to regret. And that's, I think we all know that just doesn't work out well in the end if you can't go back and change it. So.
Oh, for sure. And getting off at the Kickstarter, because I know you mentioned that. And it is a kind of fine line. You have to kind of juggle a lot of different, interests, if you will, with Kickstarter, because you talked about how being able to kind of prove a concept, but also you still have the copycats that may see it, and especially see the success or maybe the success of it on Kickstarter and maybe try to beat you to the punch. But also just from a patent attorney's perspective, we're big on timeline dates, making sure that you're within a particular date. So if you have that public disclosure, then the clock starts ticking, where at least in the U.S. you have that year to file an application. So I guess I always recommend at least filing a provisional application before you go on Kickstarter to kind of save your date. Because, once you kind of disclose it to the public like that on Kickstarter, then the clock starts where you have a year to file an application. And in some countries, such as China or countries abroad, you can't even when you publicly disclose it, that's an automatic bar for you filing it within that country. So definitely some things to juggle between, I guess, the legal side of things as well. Maybe it's the business side of things to, okay, how do I go about this process and still I am able to protect the invention, although I need to disclose it and do the proof of concept. So I guess that's just maybe something that I wanted to throw out there. But I guess as it relates to Kickstarter, I know you said the proof of concept, and you guys, which was different than most, was on Kickstarter a number of times. What was the reason for that, as opposed to just doing, okay, I had the proof of concept one time and let's go to market with it?
Yeah, I think so to your point of the provisional, I couldn't agree more. I think it's worth doing. You can, as you know, you can do them as an individual. My co-founders had a family friend that worked for a law firm here in Philadelphia. And said, look, I'll work with you guys on it. You guys draft it up. I'll review it. I'll keep your costs down. But I would recommend that you do that before now I go, not to go off on a tangent, I go one step further. Say, there's so many people that don't want to share an idea. Sometimes it's good to share the idea in a small trusted group. Obviously, if you have an idea around coffee, you're not going to talk about that with Keurig. But if you have some ideas within friends and family or friends of friends, you and I both know what it takes to bring an idea, even if it's a great idea, to a viable product, to a brand and a company and a market. is two very, very different things. So sometimes sharing in that trusted network lets you get some of that feedback early on to determine, is this all really worth pursuing? What's the end game here? Is there, is this scalable? So, so the reason we did Kickstarter multiple times, the first time it was truly a proof of concept, right? I mean, it was an invention. It's still a can opener. You could do this with a household can opener, right? And I also tell people you can also cut a steak with a butter knife, but they make a steak knife for a reason.
Right.
Buy a loaf of bread, but you can buy sliced bread. So for us, it was this idea of, all right, let's do a proof of concept. Let's see if people will buy it. What would they pay for it? I'll give you a little bit of backstory. It was $45 the very first Kickstarter. For the product, it cost us $43.75. It was $1.25, which, as you know, is going to get roasted in just administrative processes. And but that wasn't the point. The point was, let's just see if people are going to buy it.
It's so, I know this maybe it was an early version, but you saying that the early version took $43 to make?
Yeah, $43.75 to get it made here in the States. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you still, out of curiosity, I don't want to kind of go too much off on the tangent, but are you still making it in the States, or are you going abroad? Because I know some people are like, they're just hell bent on, hey, it has to be made in the U.S., which obviously you have a number of benefits in terms of being able to be close to it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, difference between having it manufactured here in the U.S. and having it manufactured abroad is whether you not have a business or not. Just because.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that first version was supposed to be made in the States, which is why it was $43.75. The Kickstarter went really well. We did like 214,000 in 30 days. That was an indication of,
crazy.
All right, there's an opportunity here. People are buying it. They're going to pay 45. But imagine, well, we're not going to make any money. We got to make money to grow the business. Right. So we did kind of last minute say, you know what, let's look overseas. And we went overseas. So we went to China for 2015 to maybe 2017, 2018. But before we went back to Kickstarter in the end of 2019, 2020, basically the start of it was, all right, we need a bigger margin, a lower cost version of the product because more people will buy it if it's a lower cost.
For sure.
And so we were fortunate enough to find a manufacturer here in the States, a husband and wife couple down in Maryland that said that could make it at a price economical enough for us to get a margin and sell it and then use the proceeds to continue growing the brand and developing the product. And so the current hand tool is done here. We do have the commercial versions made overseas because it's like 88 machined components, and nobody would pay the price tag to have that done here in the States.
So then with the funds from the first Kickstarter campaign, was that just pretty much spent on just essentially manufacturing the product here? Is that kind of how that first?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough when we moved over to China. I think our costs came down to about 26 for what we had sold at 45. So we had some extra money. A lot of the business things, which again, not to go in tangents, but you learn, like, we didn't really have a game plan. Our plan was go to Kickstarter, prove this as a concept. And so we ended the year with about $80,000 sitting in our bank account, not touching it. That was the business's money. And my co-founder and I had day jobs. And then Uncle Sam came in and said, hey, that's profit. Cool. I get, 30-40% of that. We were like, man, that's, So we took the balance of what we had. We're like, look, we got to buy inventory. We got to do something to consume the money to grow the brand. Otherwise, it's just going to get taken. And that time from 2015 to 2020 was like trying to re-strategize. And then life happened. I had my first child.
Nice. Congrats.
We already had a renovation plan. So some of those distractions came into play before we went back in 2020.
So out of curiosity, because I have a lot of people who come on, and again, Kickstarter, it seems like it's a very valuable option that a lot of people should look at to kind of, like you said, prove that concept out. But then you have maybe a fair amount of people who talk about, hey, let's hire a marketing company to help us out with Kickstarter as opposed to trying to do this ourselves and not giving us the best chance of success just because we don't know what we're doing. Did you guys hire a marketing company to help out with the Kickstarter campaign, or did you do it yourself?
No, every time we did it ourselves. And
nice. That's to have that.
Yeah.
A lot of sales is crazy doing it yourself.
Yeah. It's a lot. It is demanding on so many fronts leading up to it. I mean, it's months of work to try to make it successful leading up to it. It's months of work on the back end, trying to make it all happen, fulfill everything, get in touch with people, handle problems that come up. I've heard of people using marketing companies that have done very well.
Yeah.
And I've also seen a lot of the bootstrapped efforts. I think my argument would be, it kind of depends on the end game. If you intend to make a product that you're hoping to just sell to a big brand at some point, yeah, maybe go the right, and you have the money from a day job income, have a marketing company help you. If you think you're going to build a brand out of your product and a company from it, going through that process just lets you learn more about the business, the marketing, customer service. You save money, you consume time, but in the process, you learn about accounting, you learn about things that you just never thought you'd have to learn about to survive. And so I think it can be done both ways, but no matter what, in order to make it a successful campaign, I think from what we've seen, you got to put the homework in, even if it's a marketing company, giving them the homework that you're doing on top of what you're paying them to do is just going to increase the likelihood of success. So
nice. And then I actually like, which I haven't heard before in terms of what's your end game. If your end game is selling a company, maybe you go to marketing company. But if your end game is to build a business out of the product, then maybe you do it yourself and knowing that you're going to spend a lot more time. But those lessons are going to be extremely valuable in the long run. So I haven't heard that, but I think that's a good take for sure. So you have the first one. And then did you go to China afterwards? Because it seems like you're saying ultimately, at least currently, maybe it's done here in the U.S. or manufactured in the U.S. So did you go to China, then come back to the U.S., or how did that kind of work out in terms of manufacturing?
Yeah, so the first one was supposed to be done in the U.S., and that was the 4375. Yep. And then when the campaign went so well, we just told people, look, we're not going to be able to stick with the U.S. option because given all these last minute things, these changes that were needing to be made, it's going to cost us more to make what we had sold it to you for, and we won't be here in a couple months. So, you bite the bullet. You just tell people, look, I know we said American made, but it's not going to be, and that's it. And so it was made in China until 2018. And then we said, look, I think we can make this version of the product, what we have, or a variant of what we have now, much easier. That's when this 2018, 2019, let's start looking here in the States. And we did all of that homework before the 2020 campaign, which it was really the month of December for 2019 and then stopped in 2020 pre-COVID. And it worked out in our favor on so many fronts. I mean, a lower cost product. We started at $16 for the early bird special. I think it went up to maybe $19. So it went from 3,200 people in 2015 buying 4,200 units of product to something like 18,000 people buying 23,000 units of product in 2020. And that, I think, played a big role over the cost being down, that $16, $19 range. And for that, it was done in the States.
What was your guys' cost from manufacturing compared to like now what you guys are manufacturing? I mean, I'm sorry, what was the cost for manufacturing in China as opposed to what you guys paying now manufacturing it here in the U.S.? Was it kind of comparable or?
No, it was big. So that in 2015, again, it was 43.75 here in the States. But to go to China for the same thing, the initial run was like $23.50. So there was a big gap. And then when we came back into the States, we've always tried to maintain roughly a 5x margin. So it's probably,
nice.
A good business probably should maintain those multiples. And that's a multiple that we maintain now for the product that we have, that we sell online. So,
okay. No, nice. That's good. That's good to hear. So then I guess with all that kind of being said, and with the Kickstarter campaign seems like being very successful up until that point in time, what was the decision like to say, okay, I want to go on Shark Tank?
So we were once again very fortunate. I think the great thing about Kickstarter, there are those drawbacks of knockoffs and illegitimate manufacturers taking product, but other companies have scouts looking at that, and so does Shark Tank. And so Shark Tank had approached us in, I want to say 2018, and we didn't think we were ready for it. We didn't really have a business. We just had a product.
Yeah. Did they see it on like the Kickstarter or whatnot?
Exactly. And so 2020, they saw it again. They have, like talent scouts reach out and they said, hey, what would you guys think about coming on Shark Tank? And amongst the group of us, we're like, what do you guys think? And we're like, yeah, I think this time we're ready. And, it was wild. I mean, it's a lot there, again, a lot of work, like I think every other person you probably talked to says months of work, 6 months probably worth of work, leading up to it and applications and rehearsing and stuff. But it felt like an opportunity to really present the brand to the world at that point. And it was an amazing opportunity to have. So.
So then, your guys' episode was interesting. Not to, I have to ask this honestly. Were you maybe nervous at all as the Sharks maybe were having trouble trying to open up the lid with the openers? Was that like gave you guys anxiety in real time? Or because it seems like kind of looking at the reviews, especially like on Amazon and things like that, the reviews are great on it. But I guess going through watching that episode, it was like, okay, maybe they were having trouble. A lot of them, and it seems like maybe a few of them dropped out as a result of that. I guess in real time, were you guys maybe kind of nervous or anxious over that?
I was anxious going in. I was anxious when you're standing behind the doors waiting for them to open. That's probably my most nervous moment. When I got it on the carpet, I wasn't nervous then because we kind of expected that this was going to happen. Okay. In hindsight, I don't think we were ready for Kickstarter because the product has since evolved. We're on the 4th iteration of the product that's shown on Shark Tank.
Oh, since Shark Tank, you guys have kind of made it better. And that's one of the things, and I'm sorry to cut you off, that people just don't realize either where, hey, these products, and this is a good thing, and I know we get off into the IP side of things after this, but a lot of times patents are incremental improvements. And that's a good thing, like you said about having a business, is that you can file patents on those incremental improvements and essentially extend the life of, protecting your product out in terms as you continue to evolve and kind of make it better. So I guess I didn't realize that you guys since Shark Tank had multiple iterations, 4 iterations, I think you were saying, since Shark Tank, to make it work even better than.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as an inventor, you have to accept at least constructive criticism positively. Even criticism, which isn't always very constructive, you got to take it and you got to listen to it, and you got to bite your tongue on some things, but know that it's coming as a result of people frustrated interacting with something you made and you invented. So if you take it constructively, if you take it positively, you sit there and say, all right, how do I, it's another problem, right? And if you have an inventor mindset, it's always about problem solving. How do I solve that next problem? And we knew that if we made a product that was easier and better to use, more people are going to use it. The concept's going to become more adopted. And we as a company could at some point thrive, every point from that 2020 Shark Tank and Kickstarter till now has kind of been more surviving. But listening to that feedback and evolving the process. And so we knew that was going to happen. Okay. We had a feeling it was going to happen on the show. It didn't help that you have to greet the cans. Most TV networks, even HSN, were on. You can't, the cans got to get covered. And so we had to glue neoprene koozies, which take away your dexterity. And so it was comical. I tell people it was comical. I mean, spilled beer actually happened. And, so that, there, none of that actually gets edited out. It's a right show too.
Yeah, no, I guess it makes for good TV, which is the whole point of things. Which was interesting. But then again, you guys still were able to at least get an offer from Damon John. Now, and one of the things that I have kind of found out from, interviewing a number of guests who've been on Shark Tank is that you get a deal, and a lot of those deals they fall by the wayside and don't make it to the finish line. Did you guys deal with Damon and end up making it to the finish line, or was it like, we don't like the terms, or for one reason or another, it just didn't make the finish line? Can you kind of talk kind of quickly about that?
Yeah. And as you know, we're very limited in what we can share.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Ours did not. And largely on our part, we were going through a lot of problems at the time. I mean, the iOS upgrade that occurred in 2020, it was 2021, caused ads to just tank, and our revenue tanked. And, then naturally you start getting into internal partner issues, is, who's doing what and why is this happening? And we just got to a point where we had just asked, just said, look, we've got to figure our stuff out. We got a lot of internal problems we're working through right now, and now's not the time to take on an investor. And I mean, an amazing guy, an amazing team, we still stay in touch from time to time, but they are, they were wildly helpful in helping connect us with other entrepreneurs, connect us with other resources, to kind of take the business to the next level. But it was just at a point where it was, we made some stupid mistakes too. And it's funny, we have a board of advisors now, to kind of help prevent some of those stupid mistakes from happening. And one of our advisors is like, they're not mistakes because you're still here to talk about them.
Right.
They're just very expensive learning lessons, and don't do it again. Otherwise, then it's a mistake. And, so yeah, it was a pretty cool experience though. And I mean, for those guys, it's tough. I sit there and I think about it occasionally, like to be a shark on that show has got, to me, it's overwhelming. The idea of managing so many different companies and so many different products or services or processes. It's like, it's not my thing,
Well, yeah. And I guess to that point, Lisa Lloyd, who was, I had interviewed her maybe a month or so ago, and she was on season 1 of Shark Tank, and she actually did a deal with Damon John on, it was like TC Treasure Chest, essentially like a stuffed animal that had this novel injection molding process, but it had compartments within it, so you can put keys, whatever, inside the compartments of the stuffed animal. And she did a deal with Damon John. I think that one ended up going through, and the company was good for a while there, and then it kind of tapered off. But I guess as he, as Shark Tank continued on, and like you said, they're dealing with all these companies. He and I'm pretty sure all the sharks have something similar to this, where he had built more of a team that kind of manages this stuff as opposed to him having to be in on a day in and day out.
You almost have to.
These companies, and I guess she was somebody, because he had worked with her already and knew how Lisa is amazing. She has a number of like 8 or something licensed products, has made millions off just licensing her product. But she was one of the guys that Damon had hired to come help her organize her team that was managing all these products that he was investing in from Shark Tank. So I think, like you said, you almost have to have a team, and which is not an issue. I think especially it seems like you have some good companies, you have some companies that maybe are not so good that you invest in, but I guess that's just kind of maybe the game that they're playing at that point in time, which is
yeah. It's even having, like, we just didn't have the formalities of what a company should have, and we learned that quickly. Like, we didn't have a system of checks and balances on decisions that we were making. We did a Barstool Sports sponsorship and a NASCAR sponsorship in COVID and spent a lot of money, thinking that what we had learned from 2015 about Uncle Sam taking 30-40% of the proceeds from Kickstarter because we didn't reinvest them, that we should just use this money and reinvest in the brand before we go through the year so we don't lose the money.
Yep.
And we spent it on sponsorships. And we also realized a product like ours is not good for sponsorship. It takes awareness, it takes education, it takes to understand why it is you would actually need it. And so those were just among the mistakes we made. But I think the thing that Damon saw, because it's funny, people are like, I can't believe you got a deal after what, excuse my language, a shit show of an episode that looked like with spilled beer. But I think what he saw was the potential, which is now slowly starting to play out with the opportunities that we have, is that it's, it's a global opportunity. Everybody drinks from cans. Yep. Nobody enjoys it. And yeah, so.
No, and I guess, man, to your guys' point, I mean, that's the great thing about just entrepreneur inventing things, that this stuff is not going to go perfect. You're going to have learning moments. You're going to have learning lessons and moments that don't go good, but still being able to, I guess, as your board of advisors said, to learn from those things and kind of be better as a result of it and still be here to talk about it. That's an amazing thing. So that's, I guess, another reason why, if for those who are watching, who think things have to go perfect, you're not going to have ups and downs or learning moments. That's just kind of not a part of the process, especially when you're kind of bringing something from to market and building a company. You're going to have learning lessons, but you can still make money while going through those learning moments. So I guess that's
And I think the last thing I'd say really on this topic too is, like, Ring Doorbell is the perfect example of that. Here's a company that didn't get any offers, was kind of, I don't say made fun of, but like, why would you want that? Why would you want that? And
right.
it's everywhere. I mean, and every company is making their own version of it. It's insane. I mean,
Yep. And look, one of the things I know I was telling you in terms of doing this, especially for the audience to kind of help them, but I take notes and I go back and watch the episodes that we do. And one of the things that is interesting to me as I kind of go back is a lot of these products, especially consumer products, and you had mentioned it and touched on it, and I interviewed Wayne from the inventor of the selfie stick, as well as others who are making these consumer products. They talk about it where, hey, this stuff, like you said, it needs to be brought awareness and needs education. And that's, again, going back to the social media thing, where social media can be good for, because if you just kind of slap this thing on a shelf of a store, people are going to look at it like, hey, what's this thing? But as you're able to now educate the audience with social media or whatever is your best means of doing that, I think that is going to be more valuable than, I guess, just putting it out there, at least maybe on a storefront or a shelf of a store, whatever the case may be. I thought that was that you talked about with, needing awareness and education on it.
Yeah, especially if it's a novel product like ours. I tell people ours is a novel, but it's practical. And there are times you use it, and there's times you don't use it. But, if you're sitting on the beach and you want to have a Corona and you're trying to shove a lime in a can, there you go. That's an opportunity. If you're somewhere where you can't bring glass and cut, so we constantly, because people were like, and that's the most common question we get at trade shows at consumer fairs is why? Why do I need this? And then when you have a chance to explain that and tell them, and then get them to actually try the end result. Pick your favorite beverage. Coca-Cola is non-alcoholic seltzer. Try the difference. Cool. And then, we're not religious about it. If you're home and you have a glass and it's your favorite beer, pour it in a glass. We're not, it's not that serious, but it does take a lot of education to get people to understand why.
No, we talked about it a little bit, but now I want to get off into, I guess, the area that, I'm more so familiar with on the IP side of things. I know you talked about we're having a family friend who helped with the provisional application, and it seems like for the most part, the obtaining of the patent was pretty straightforward. But I would imagine with all the successful Kickstarter campaigns, and kind of that's one of the things that just kind of the way it goes when things are successful and starts making money. You have these copycats and infringers, knockoffs start coming up. You guys have any story or experiences that you can share as it relates to the IP side of things, particularly maybe with the knockoffs and the infringers, and how you guys dealt with that?
Absolutely. Probably too many for the rest of the episode. So if we want to do a sequel at some point, we can. But so 2020, we had ended the Kickstarter in, I think, May. Product was ready to start. We started delivering around that time from July 4th weekend in 2020, the heart of COVID. All of a sudden, we had people peppering our social media. Hey, I went to go order your product and I see but it's not on your website and blah, blah, blah. And so over that weekend, we were made aware of, I think, 4 knockoffs. So these are companies that ordered the product from Kickstarter, reverse engineered it, made their own version, quickly got to market before or right around the same time we did. But, it's funny. They say imitation is a sincere form of flattery. I don't know how I feel in that moment because it's a part of you that's angry. And then there's another part of us, because they were using all of our content. They're using our name. They're using everything.
Oh, they were leaving their actual name?
Yeah, they were using everything. They were literally, it was counterfeit, so to speak. But because they were using all of our content, our images, our names, our everything, we saw we did $150,000 in 4 days because of their marketing efforts. So it was they're again a double-edged sword of you want to take them down, but at the same time, you're making money off of their advertising efforts because they're using your content, and people are smarter these days. They're like, oh, this doesn't look like the right website. Let me go to the one that says the name. And so from that kind of kicked off what we thought was going to be a passive IP process for the company, because it had been until then. But from there on out, it just evolved into so much. We've gone through, we started off with some of these software providers that are, trademark, copyright, anti-infringement. They're scouring the web looking for people using it, taking down listings. It's costly. It's a few grand a month to do it. On the utility side of things, how do we protect the utility? We were introduced by some other founders of other companies. Hey, the International Trade Commission has a process. It's a 337. It's a general exclusion order. The concept is to prevent unfair imports, which affect economic opportunity. And that was a very expensive process that only works when you can find the ports that the stuff is coming in from.
Okay.
And a lot of stuff, as you know, these days can be airmailed from Europe, airmailed from other countries. Therefore, it's not showing up in a container ship. So we went through a process there. And also, as you know, and this is what's difficult, I think all potential patent owners need to know is just because you procure a patent and get it issued and granted, you still have to pay to protect it and enforce it. And that was very eye-opening at the time. You're like, well, wait a minute. I have this piece of paper that says I own this.
Oh, so you guys didn't know about the whole, you have to still enforce the patent?
I think we kind of had some indication, but we never really thought about it because, it's until you're met with the opposition of what we went through that it was like, oh, so we got, trademarks, copyrights was different because that's easy to just take a name and use it. But yeah, that was, it was an eye opener. And And even so, our attorney was still with the same attorney. And he had said, look, guys, this is, yes, you can do that. And you're going to spend a lot of money, but you can also take those resources and grow your business and grow your brand. And so your offense could be a better game in the long run than just playing defense. And it was an interesting evolution because it's kind of, since then, we met a company. I don't know if I'm supposed to share names, not on here, but we met a company. It's two younger brothers who had made a children's product that were knocked off. They got irritated. They created this contingent lawsuit process, and they're based out of Texas. And so they reached out to us a year later, and they're like, hey, you guys are getting really knocked off. I mean, everything is, we have a process, a contingent lawsuit. What we'll do is we front the money. We're not attorneys. We're a litigation financing firm. We front the money to some attorneys that will go after these guys. And then because we think it's a big enough case, we will front the money. So you have to qualify first. And then as a result of that, we split the proceeds. Attorneys get 20%, we get 40, you get 40. And that might change based on clients and the situation. But I was like, it almost seemed too good to be true.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, well, let's go ahead and do it. And so we're now on our third lawsuit. And what we've done is taken the proceeds from those lawsuits. And this is individual sellers that we thankfully yet have not been hit by any large brands or knocked off by any large, consumer product brand. So we take those proceeds and we reinvest those proceeds into more IP. And right now, if 2 or 3 more patents and PCTs, and just use that process to kind of evolve our IP portfolio.
And I've heard something similar. I'm not sure if it was that particular company where you can get essentially farm it out to someone else. So I make sure I'm kind of understanding things. So what were the two brothers? Were they created the company, or they were just working with some attorneys on this contingency plan?
So they created the company because their product was knocked off. And then as a result of this idea, they went through a legal process themselves and were like, okay, this is costly.
Yeah, for sure.
But done right, we can recover. And then I'm guessing that is kind of what planted the seed for this new idea, this new business model, this service. And so now they are just litigation financing. They do the work of collecting. They hire the team of people that goes out and scours the web for trademark and copyright infringements. They're actually developing software now that is similar to some of the other softwares that are available in the market, but they still hire an attorney. And in our case, it's in Chicago. It was Chicago, Illinois, where e-commerce law helps favor entrepreneurs a bit more.
So do they do with patents as well, or just copyrights and trademarks?
Just copyrights and trademarks. We've asked about the patent stuff, and they're like, maybe it'll get there, but there's such an evolution. I mean, as as a patent attorney, it's to look at someone's patent against an infringing product requires a technical skill set.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Because you're looking at the
only
claims.
You have.
Yep. Yeah. You're looking at the claims and seeing whether or not the infringing product is, they infringe on those claims. It's more of a technical skill as opposed to, like you said, you're looking at a name. I mean, a name or a logo or whatever, and saying, okay, this is. So on that's interesting. So they were going after the people who were infringing. Essentially, I would imagine your trademarks for Draft Top.
Yeah, what they did was, as you know, everybody and their mother is a seller of a product these days. You can do it as a side hustle. It's on Alibaba and it's on eBay. And what was happening was the Chinese manufacturers that took the patent took the utility rights and decided to pursue product in 2020 were selling in mass through these platforms like Alibaba, so that all of a sudden you could get these individual sellers that are like, hey, I sell housewares. Cool, let's add this can opener product to our mix. And what those companies would then do, that the individuals would then do, is like, oh, there's a legitimate company. Let's just use their trademark because they're getting a lot of reviews and good attention. We'll use that to promote it, but in turn are infringing on the trademark and copyright. And because it's, to your point, it's easier to enforce and go after, they focused on the company that we're working with that does the litigation financing focuses on that.
Gotcha.
To go after them. So
okay. So I'm assuming that they're going after people. And I'm sorry for the kind of questions, but this is
no, that's okay.
So I guess maybe what's the name of the company I'm in terms of
it's financing? Absolutely. Yeah, it's called Edison Legal Financing, EdisonLF.com.
Okay.
We're based out of Austin. And again, it's a brilliant group of people. They do handle things case by case, and they told us that ahead of time, that if the infringements are not big enough, it doesn't make sense for us to put the money out and then pursue the process, because then we might not get our money back. And
it's a business decision at the end of the day. It's kind of similar to like doing personal injury, where a lot of those cases are contingency, but you're going to make sure that the case more or less is a slam dunk, and the fact that it's, like you said, enough money involved to the point where if I'm kind of, in their case, even lending out money, just not the time, but they're lending out money that they're going to get that back plus some, because it's a business at that point. And that's interesting stuff. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool process.
I definitely look into that, and maybe I'll reach out to those guys. That's pretty cool. And I do think at some point, unfortunately, it's like just the federal government moves slow. Kind of going back to, I know you're in the aeronautical industry. Just think of what the government was doing with NASA, and then when they kind of gave it to Elon Musk at SpaceX, things just started kind of just going like they just had a lot more progress, a lot faster compared to what was maybe being done with NASA, kind of doing it on their own. So I would imagine that at some point in time, because it's a whole different ball game, especially with e-commerce and patents, which unfortunately the laws were not set up for that. Now they do change. Unfortunately, they're changing a lot slower than what patent inventors or inventors and business owners would like. But I do think at some point it's going to catch up to the point where you can easily get these knockoffs taken down, so that it's going to really benefit the owner. I guess maybe at least that's my personal opinion on things.
Yeah, I completely agree, because my whole career prior to all this was aerospace and the FAA and the government. I mean, they're just and so is the USPTO. I mean, and I get it. It was established 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years ago in some cases for certain government entities, and a lot of times they're not profit, so their incentive to adapt with the times is not the same, or their ability, the resources to adapt to times, not the same. And but I think for entrepreneurs, the one thing I've learned along the way is that if you're, and I think it's a game, it's I never played football, but a strong offense is important. If you are playing defense all the time, you're never going to score. If you're not scoring, you're not advancing. So I think there has to be this balance for entrepreneurs in taking your wins, reinvest them in your defense where needed, as well as in your offense, and trying to promote. Because if you take all the money you get for these proceeds, you just go get more patents and trademarks, but you're not marketing and promoting and selling your product, you're just not going to advance the revenue front. So it kind of has to be a balance, and everyone's situation is different. But it is, it's a world economy now. So you're also dealing with, the world is one, and you're dealing with that across various countries. And so from the patent standpoint, I'm sure some countries are going to become a bit more progressive in how they move on this front than others. But
Well, and that's, I definitely agree with that. I think one of the things that I did wanted to mention, you talked about the government and how not for profit. A lot of times it's not for profit. The USPTO is actually one of the only government agencies or departments that actually makes money. As you mentioned, a lot of government departments don't make money.
I didn't know that, actually. Cool.
The USPTO is one of the only government departments that makes money, which you would think that would give them even extra incentive or additional incentive to kind of figure this thing out sooner rather than later. But they make a ton of money, which I guess makes sense, because you figure all the stuff that's going on in the U.S. and then with companies trying to file here in the U.S. patent applications. But again, the U.S. market is like the golden market. I was interviewing a gentleman who has an aerofit breathing device in their companies in Denmark, and he mentioned like essentially the U.S. is a holy grail of everybody wanting to come sell their products here just because of, I guess, for one.
Because we can sue them, we can sue them.
They said that the Americans might have got the most random and maybe in some cases dumbest things, but I guess that's what it is. But no, so in saying all that, now as a result of you get a lot of influx of people in different countries, China, countries in Europe, India, whatever, that they actually file. I work on a ton of stuff that originated abroad, but the company wants to file, or the person wants to file it in the U.S. So the U.S. ends up seeing a lot of money from people filing applications from abroad in the U.S. So it makes sense in terms of them being, or the U.S. being USPTO being a profitable government department based on everything that's going on.
And one bit of advice that we had gotten from our attorney long ago, and I think it was because it was a friend of the family, was this idea of like, guys, you could try to protect everything and anything. You could also try to protect everything and anything overseas, but some countries don't really enforce this stuff. And you also want to make sure you have enough economic opportunity in the countries that you're trying to. Otherwise, you're going to consume a lot of money in IP, and the brand's not worth anything, and then therefore the IP is not worth anything. So it's be strategic in what you're looking to protect and where you're going to protect it and how much you spend on it based on your opportunity.
Well, and I think that's great advice, and I think man, it's a lot more strategy than what people think. Nancy Tedeschi, who had like a screw, it was like a pretty cool screw for your glasses that had a tab on it, so you put the screw in, and then before you like screw it into the like the frame and the part that goes around your ear, you kind of snap off the tab, then you screw it in, and she ended up licensing it to the largest distributor in the lens distributor in the world, and she was manufacturing it in China. So you guys wouldn't have to worry about China, especially if you were manufacturing it here in the U.S. But she manufactured it in China, but she also was selling it, say, in Europe, a lot of countries in Europe. So she got the U.S. patent, she got a patent in the EPO, which is the European Patent Office. Then her patent attorney pretty much, I don't want to say forced her, but like, hey, you really need to go in China. She's like, no, I don't want to go in China. But she ended up listening to the patent attorney. So then as it played out, because she was manufacturing it in China, she was able to successfully defend it in China multiple times, which a lot of people think that you can't defend your product in China or your patent in China, but she was able to successfully defend it in China at a fraction of the cost of what you have to defend it here in the U.S. When you're kind of going through that kind of litigation. And it kind of really helped her business tremendously because she was making a ton of these things in China. She said, I would have never got the European patent because even if you make it in Europe and selling in Europe, you're selling an infringing product, I can still make it my product that you're infringing cheaper than what you can make it if you're making it in Europe and I can make it and I'm making it in China, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you're making it in Europe for $1.20 and I'm making it in China for 50 cents. Even if you do make it in China and sell it in China, make it in Europe and selling in Europe, I'm still making it in China for a cheaper price, and therefore I'm able to undercut your price on my product.
Yes.
But she was able to kind of successfully defend it in China, which she said that was a game changer for me. And she thank her attorney every day that she listened to him and got the patent in China. So yeah, I'm saying all that to say it is like, it do become a business, really a business strategy, and how you're looking at it based on where you're selling it, where you're making it, and you're trying to make sense of all of that. So,
yeah, I've heard China's more progressive on the IP front than most people realize.
Yeah,
that they are out because they want manufacturing there. They want people to bring products there for manufacturing. And I think, it is distinguished as not China necessarily. There's other problems, right? We want things cheap. The American consumer, yes, it moves things over there. But from an IP standpoint, it's illegitimate people. And by the way, those exist here in the States. It is, it's illegitimate people. It's bad actors, and they're bad actors here in the States.
For sure. Absolutely. I've seen a number of people, another guy training Mask, which is a decent sized company. He was showing me pictures offline of essentially the Chinese authorities going and bust warehouses where you have kind of bad actors kind of with boxes of the infringing product. So it seems like China is kind of a lot more progressive than what people think, which I think that was a good point. Maybe moving on here. I know we're coming up on an hour and trying to wrap up here. What would you say, maybe number one, was the biggest breakthrough with the product? And then on the flip side, what would you say was the biggest, maybe challenge, or the biggest hurdle you had to overcome? And maybe that hurdle was kind of dealing with the knockoffs and the copycats and the infringing product. But you maybe answer as far as what was the biggest breakthrough with the product in the business, and then the biggest hurdle with things?
Yeah, so I think the biggest breakthrough we've had, sadly, has just occurred in the last couple months with the commercial version of our product.
Really?
And I think the reason is there's and I think it also answers the biggest hurdle that we've had, which is I completely underestimated how difficult it would be to market something like this, something that you don't know or think you need until you've tried it. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, yeah. And hey, for $15, sure, I'll buy one, and maybe I'll keep it in the tied to the cooler or my kitchen drawer, or, but the biggest breakthrough has been the commercial product that we've been working on since 2018. It's evolved. It's gone completely back to the starting board, has been over the idea that when a bar, restaurant, stadium, music venue is serving the open top can, it is a very human sensory experience that people are used to. It's drinking from a glass. And the only way to compare it is that side by side. When you're handed that can of, Coca-Cola or Pepsi, and you're like, the sippy cup, I hate this. Can I have a cup poured into? No, sorry, we don't do single-use plastic cups. So now you are serving this open top concept to people where that's the experience they expect and they want because they get it in every other setting, but we don't serve glass. And so that breakthrough has been this idea, and we've been talking about it as a theory for the longest time, is this idea of when you are served the open top can, you're kind of like, hey, this is interesting. How'd that happen? This is pretty good too. And now your interest and awareness around this option drives you to come back to then want to buy the low-cost $15 consumer hand version tool. So,
right, and I'm thinking the light bulb is going off as you're talking about it in terms of, I would imagine if you had to do things differently, you would have did that one first because that was probably a little easier to market. And then they would have been like, man, when I was at that venue or whatever, I had a good experience, like you said, with the sensories and being able to kind of pluck the top off. And I'll buy one of those things that maybe are $15, $20 for the house or if I'm out camping or whatever the case may be. So it seems like you would have did it reversed if you had to do it all over again.
And I think even to the point of Shark Tank, where I feel like we had a proof of concept ready in 2020 when we went on Shark Tank, but because of what occurred in the summer with the knockoffs, we were like, well, we had a provisional, but we're like, I don't want to tell the rest of the world about this until it's fully thought out, ready to go to market.
Nope.
So let's not bring it on Shark Tank. But had we brought that on Shark Tank, I think the sharks would have viewed the image of the company and the brand much differently. Like this is, you got multiple verticals. You have a business vertical with bars, restaurants, stadiums, and then you have a consumer version of the product. And but you can't go back, and you can only learn from it. And like I say, it's it's not a mistake; it's a learning experience, and kind of excited for the future now. So
no, for sure. And I would imagine that one maybe has a less chance of getting knocked off because I think you talked about the number of parts that's included with it. So I would imagine that. I mean, again, as long as something's successful, it has an opportunity to get knocked off. But I would imagine that you will see maybe a lot less knockoffs of that one compared to the consumer version.
Yeah, I'd always wonder that too, because I talk about trademark attorneys and like, look, BMW parts are hundreds of dollars and they get knocked off. So it's not necessarily the price of the product, but maybe the complexity and the level of engineering, because that version of the product has to last, tens of thousands of cans because those environments serve volume. And therefore, trying to make something cheap and quick and get it at a lower price is just going to result in a bar or restaurant buying it, failing, them getting irritated, And so as a result of it, I do think that it's going to be longer before we see it, but it'll probably happen at some point,
Again, also too, I think it's almost like that whole thing we talked about in law school where who's your customer? If you have somebody who, is buying Louis Vuitton and they're spending $2,000, $3,000 on the product, they're going to be a lot more careful in terms of who they're buying the product from, as opposed to maybe me going out to Myers or Walmart and buying some jogging pants or whatever for, $10 or $20. So it seems like I would imagine that business, the restaurant or whatever, they're going to be a lot more careful in terms of who they're buying it from, especially if they're spending the money on it, as opposed to, the consumer who maybe is less concerned with who they're buying it from as long as they're getting a product, which I would imagine help you guys out in the long run.
Completely, because it's also I think it's their business environment too. They don't want this thing to fail. We sold a product to Marriott down in Texas a couple of weeks ago. They were really excited about it, and then they ran into an issue on Friday. And I'm like, that I think is the difference between a knockoff and a legitimate company or brand is we stand behind it. So it's 9:00 Friday night. Here's my cell phone number. Let's get on the phone. What's going on? We didn't need to get on the phone, thankfully. But it was, here's the resources. Did you check the manual? There's a maintenance section if you haven't performed this. If it hasn't been cleaned, but they looked at it and we made this manual easy. I mean, there's those QR codes. You can watch a video on how to do this, and simple adjustment. Once done, it's back in commission. The whole rest of the evening goes well. Nice. And then the buyer was happy with it. The buyer is like, hey man, really, thank you for this. And even giving the cell phone numbers, like, call me. I'm not going to put you through some customer service. Just call me and we'll get it figured out,
Hi, for sure. Yeah. That's sweet. That's sweet. So I see like that maybe answer my question as well, as far as a new product or new products that I typically ask. It seems like with this new version for restaurants and kind of hotels and things like that, maybe that answer that. I guess the final two questions I have is number one, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs? And it seems like you just going through the process coming from a completely different industry. Seems like this has had a successful or a positive impact on your life overall, but at the same time having gone through the ups and downs of it and still seemingly being excited at this point for the future, not only of this company, but whatever else that you invent. What advice maybe would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs as they maybe look or think about kind of going down a similar path that you have?
I think the most important thing I can think of, and I do think about this a lot, is be passionate about what you're doing. Because if you're not, it's not going to last.
Okay.
I mean, if you're just trying to make money, the first round of hurdles you might get through, the second round you might get through, but by the third or fourth, you're going to be like, forget it. I'm on to the next thing, or I should go back and get a day job. Yeah. If you are passionate about, and I'm not wildly passionate about can openers, but I am about the idea of inventing. Be passionate, because I think that's what's going to get you to. It's also going to make you more committed and serious about the business behind it.
I definitely agree with that. And then I guess the last question is, how can people follow you, whether it's on social media, and how can people purchase the product, and then also follow just the company as well?
Yeah. So I'm the only one not on social media. I'm a bit of a square. I don't feel like I have any time to be socializing most times, but I live vicariously through everybody else. You can go to @DraftTop. Don't forget the second T. So DRAFTTOP for social media, and then drafttop.com is the website. And and we're starting to share more about the story, because I think the consumer, not just the American consumer, likes to see the behind the scenes, and it's a big part of our mission now, is to kind of share these learning lessons and stuff, let people feel like they're a part of what we're going through, and not just sell them on something. So.
No, yeah, it seems like that's that's a big thing these days, almost having that B-roll footage to kind of show the journey, as opposed to, social media a lot of times. And to your point, in terms of maybe not being off of social media, it can get, I guess, kind of dual in terms of, people posting the highlights of things, but being able to keep kind of the ups and downs of things, and how life really happens, or how starting a business really happens. It seems like it can be refreshing and kind of garner more audience or more support than just kind of posting highlights day in and day out. So.
Yeah, I think if you not being on social media, but seeing it, when you hear about other people's failures, and it's usually after the case, and I tell people, like, you don't usually hear about people that you don't hear about success stories that didn't become successful because they didn't get public. So when you hear those success stories, like Ring Doorbell, I sat in a speech once where all the product they ordered, the circuit boards were off, and they had to hand solder stuff in a garage, and then they put their initials on those circuit boards for those first round products. When you hear those, I think it lets you realize that, like, hey, this is not going to be this. It is going to be that, that picture of a mountain with its edges, and you're going to hit these troughs. But it's, don't be surprised when it happens. It's going to happen. You have to figure out how you get through that to keep going. Yeah.
And that's another part of just the podcast too, is like, okay, if you've seen a successful company, they have been through stuff, whether it's on the business side of things, on the legal side of things, with IP, for example, and that didn't deter them, and you can still be successful as a result of that. So that's definitely, I guess, another big part of just kind of having people come on and be transparent about their journey as much as they could be. And, at least for me, that gives me confidence, or just an extra boost of motivation, knowing that, man, they actually went through some serious stuff, and they still was able to come out on the other side and be excited and still have hope for the future. So that's okay.
Yeah.
This thing may not be that bad. This entrepreneur and innovation and that kind of journey may not be that bad. That's to your point. Make sure you're passionate about it, or passionate about inventing or the product or whatever it is that you're doing that's going to last you through those ups and downs. But it's not that bad at the end of the day. So no, that's cool. Yeah. I definitely appreciate the time on this one.
Same here.
Go check out social media handles and just kind of follow. I purchase the product as well, and kind of stay up to date on what they're doing. They're definitely doing some amazing things. And until next week, audience, take care.